been away for a couple weeks, and so really grateful to get to be with you again this morning after a little time away. So thank you for allowing me that, but grateful to be with you. Thinking on today, one of the things I think is interesting is how much we as people love stories. It's amazing whether the story really has purpose or doesn't have purpose. They tend to stick with us. Stories are one of those things a little bit like music that they just have a way to tapping into who we are, right? You hear a good story, you might cry. You hear a good story, you might laugh. Either way, a great story will stick with you forever. I was trying to remember today, even a story as simple as the Three Little Pigs, right? I haven't heard or said that story in probably 10 years, but I remember it. I remember the characters. Three little pigs, big bad wolf, right? I remember there's a house of hay or straw. I remember that there's a house of sticks. I remember that there's a house of bricks, right? And each one is what? One is kind of the little pig that says, I don't really want to work that much, so I'm just going to build a house really quick out of straw and call it good, right? The other pig says, well, I'm going to do a little bit better than you. I'll make it out of sticks. And then one makes out of brick. And of course, big bad wolf shows up. And he blows the house of hay down, he blows the house of sticks down, and then he comes to the house of bricks, and he cannot overcome it, right? And so it's this lesson that we learn out of this story of how the reality that we will put the work in the right way, that if we'll take the extra step, right, that it tends to end well, right? You might have to do a little more work on the upfront, but it's kind of more the overall story is to kind of do things well, to do things with excellence, to do things right. And so those kinds of stories will stick with us, and we'll remember them for the rest of our lives and be able to tell them. And then there are stories that we all get really captivated by, and I think that one of those stories is underdog stories. I think anytime we hear the story of a true underdog, we're locked in and we want to be a part of it, right? And so for me, I don't really read stories that much. I think that's kind of boring and bland, okay? But I love movie stories, okay? So one of the best underdog stories of all time, right, is this ragtag group of rebels trying to take on the galactic empire and the emperor himself, right? It's this wannabe Jedi, Luke Skywalker, taking on the formidable Darth Vader, right? And it's this total underdog story. Now, I don't know where the empire got all their money from, but it's pretty obvious they have endless resources, right? It's pretty obvious they have endless numbers, and then Vader. I mean, that's the wild card, right, is Vader. And yet we go into this story, and it's just kind of this, there's no way, right? And then we find out that the Death Star exists, basically a planet-sized weapon, right? And yet just these little bitty X-Wings and a few rebels and this one little whiny Jedi, Luke Skywalker, is going to take it all on. And yet we are captivated by it. We're drawn into it. What's interesting is in the underdog story that there always is this level of someone somewhere in the story that has faithfulness, right? So like in Star Wars, right, it's like Obi-Wan Kenobi. He like constantly keeps coming back, like, we're going to get this. Like, this is all working in the right way, right? Light and darkness are going to come, and light's going to overcome it. You even have Skywalker, who constantly keeps coming back to this faithfulness that there's good left in Darth Vader, who we find out later, Luke, I am your father, right? He constantly keeps saying there's good, and everyone else keeps going, dude, you are crazy. No, right? And really the whole story, the empire, really, the whole galaxy, right, is saying, look, the rebels, that's a great idea, and it's really sweet, and we're glad that they stick to their principles, but they're not going to beat the empire, right? But we get drawn in, and we just hope. We hope there's some way, right, that it might all come together. And today, we're going to take a break from our Ephesians study, and we're actually going to look at the book of Judges this morning. Judges chapter 6, if you have a Bible, we're going to go there, and we're going to find just this, a story. And maybe one of the most ultimate underdog stories we've ever seen, right? We're going to look at the story of a character by the name of Gideon. So actually the underdogs are the nation of Israel we're going to see. Gideon is a big piece of that. And then there's obviously the big, bad, evil Midianites. And so we're going to arrive at our story in chapter 6, verses 1 through 10. And so verses 1 through 10, if you're a Star Wars person, what we're going to read here is kind of the yellow font fading off into the galaxy. You remember that part? All right? So that's what verses 1 through 10 are. We're reading our font. It's going to go out, and then we're going to shift immediately into the first scene of the movie. So let's look at Judges 6, 1 through 10, and we're going to find out what the state of Israel is. What's going on in the story? It says, then the sons of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. And the Lord gave them into the hands of Midian 7 years. The power of Midian prevailed against Israel. Because of Midian, the sons of Israel made for themselves the dens which were in the mountains and the caves and the strongholds. For it was when Israel had sown that the Midianites would come up with the Amalekites and the sons of the east and go against them. So they would camp against them and destroy the produce of the earth as far as Gaza, and leave no sustenance in Israel, as well as no sheep, ox, or donkey. For they would come up with their livestock and their tents, and they would come in like locusts for number. Both they and their camels were innumerable, and they came into the land to devastate it. So Israel was brought very low because of Midian. And the sons of Israel cried to the Lord. Now it came about when the sons of Israel cried to the Lord on account of Midian, that the Lord sent a prophet to the sons of Israel, and he said to them, Thus says the Lord God of Israel, It was I who brought you up from Egypt and brought you out of the house of slavery. I delivered you from the hands of the Egyptians and from the hands of all of your oppressors, and disposed of them and gave you their land. And I said to you, I am the Lord your God. You shall not fear the gods of the Amorites in whose land you live, but you have not obeyed me. Right? So we get it. Galactic empire is the Midians, right? The Midianites are here. They're innumerable. And he uses this weird phrase too, right? That they're numbering like the locusts, right? We don't really get that. We tend to have one or two in our trees, right? And we kind of hear them in the evening time, right? But in biblical times and even in other parts of the world, locusts come in like crazy. I think I have a picture. Look at this. This is the show Planet Earth. Remember that? This is from them filming. And there's a locust wave coming through. And they believe that when they filmed this, that there was over 1 billion locusts coming through the air when they're filming this. So when this uses this phrase, this is the kind of picture they have. It's just a cloud of locusts coming in. That's what the Midianites are like. And Israel now has been brought low. They've been conquered. What it's talking about is they're running to the mountains, and they're hiding up in caves and in dens. They've carved out all kinds of strongholds up the mountains because they're so afraid of the Midianites, right? And they're afraid. Why? Because the Midianites keep coming back, and when they bring in their harvest, they show up and they just wreck the harvest. It's amazing, right? Because you would think that it would say the Midianites come to like steal it, but it says they actually come just to devastate it. They come with everything they need. They make camp, and they destroy their crops. And any ox, any donkey, anything that they can find, they're just wiping it out. And it says, finally, Israel is brought low, and they cry out. But here's what I find interesting. Do you notice that it doesn't say that Israel repents? It says they cry out because of the Midianites. In other words, they don't like their circumstance. So then God sends a prophet. Okay, they're finally crying out. So let's give them the reality. Hey, guys. Remember when I rescued you out of Egypt? Remember all that cool stuff that I did back then? Remember that I was the guy that protected you? Remember it was me that conquered the greatest empire the world had ever seen at that point? Yeah, and then I gave you a land, and I said, don't worship anybody but me. Just stay faithful to me. But you've disobeyed me. In other words, they've become faithless. They've gone against the covenant they've made with God. Now they're going their own way, and they're worshiping the gods of the Amorites and the Canaanites and the Midianites. And so because they've worshiped those gods, God has given them over to the Midianites and allowed them to be conquered. And even after that prophet, we end. Our yellow font now goes up into the stars and fades away. And guess what? Even after the prophet, there is no repentance. It shifts straight to our first scene. So let's look at Judges 11, chapter 6, verse 11 and 12, where we find our main character, if you will, Gideon. It says, Then the angel of the Lord came and sat under the oak that was in Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abiezrite. As his son, Gideon, was beating out wheat in the winepress in order to save it from the Midianites. The angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, The Lord is with you, O valiant warrior. So let's just stop for a second. So look, we get our context, right? Why are they in the mountains to begin with? It's because they're all terrified and afraid and believe they can't overcome the Midianites. Not only are they in the mountains, They're going back into caves. They've dug out dens. They've made strongholds all the way up in the mountains to escape. Then we come up upon our character Gideon. Now, I don't know about you, but when I hear the term wine press, I tend to think grapes and wine. But what's he in there with? Wheat. Why? He's hiding. See, it's not enough for him to be in a cave, in a den, in a stronghold up in the mountains. No, he's going to climb down into a wine press to beat out the wheat, to make sure that there is no way the Midianites find this guy. And then the angel of the Lord finally addresses him, and he gives him two statements. The Lord is with you, O valiant warrior. Now, does that make any sense? So let's just start with Gideon. I don't know about you, but when I would show up to a rebellion party, okay, I would expect us to be in the cave or in the wine press with maps and strategy, right? Hey, if we bring the ships in from over here, and if we could flank them on this side, we might be able to drive them out, right? From my 4 years in Boston, okay, I picture the guys that are the colonials saying we can take out England, right? We got some plans. We can do this. We can do that, and we can be independent. But no, Gideon's just beating out his wheat and hiding. And yet he addresses him as, "O valiant warrior." I find that fascinating. And so when we look at Scripture and we see something like this, I would venture to say that he's telling a story to say there's a point to that. And then he makes this other statement. The very first statement before he ever calls him a warrior, though, is that the Lord is with you. The Lord is with you, O valiant warrior. And so if we would read the rest of these verses, and we're not for time's sake, the first thing Gideon says is, the Lord's not with us. The Lord has abandoned us. The Lord's gone. There was a time, there was a day when he did all those miraculous works, and he rescued us out of Egypt, but it's not now. He's gone. We are conquered, and we are nobodies. This isn't God. The angel would then respond to him and say, "Go now in the strength that you have. Have I not sent you?" In other words, the Lord comes back to, I am with you. I am with you, and I give you strength. Go in the strength that I give you. And then guess what he's going to say? Go in the strength that I give you, and you are going to overcome the Midianites. Well, Gideon goes, hold on. Time out here. They look like locusts down there. They've already conquered us as it is. And then he says this, do you realize that my dad is a nobody? He goes, my family's the least of all the families in our little community here. Like, we're just the Reiningers, man. Like, this is not a big deal. And then he goes, and then not only that, I'm the youngest of all my father's children. I'm the baby here. You got the wrong guy. And so sure enough, the angel then replies to him again and says, look, I am sending you. So then Gideon has this thought, look, I'm back here in the cave. I've been beating wheat all day. Maybe I'm dealing with a little bit of heat stroke, all right? So what he says, he goes, look, if this is really you, Lord, this is really the angel of the Lord, let me run home. I'm going to kind of put a feast together for you. I'm going to bring it back. And if you're still here when I get back, we can have this conversation. So he goes back and he builds up a stew. He cooks some food. He brings it back. And sure enough, the angel is still there waiting on him. And so the angel says, put the meat that you have prepared on the rock and pour the broth over the top of it. And as he does, the angel touches his staff to the rock and it's engulfed in flame and it disappears. It's gone. Now all of a sudden Gideon's like, oh, okay, this is real. And so that's where we arrive, as this fearful Gideon now says, okay, I get who you are. I get what's going on. And so he's going to get his first marching orders, this valiant warrior. And the marching orders are going to be this, starting in verse 25 of chapter 6. The angel commands him to go down to his home and tear down the Asherah of his father. What's an Asherah, you might ask? It's basically a big statue of worship to another god. And understand who it belongs to. It belongs to his father, but it also belongs to the whole community. So the whole town, if this is Kingfisher, I'm going to go to my dad's house, and where everybody gathers to worship whatever god we worship that brings in the harvest, I'm going to tear down what belongs to my dad, and the whole community comes and worships. But guess what? Let's look, verse 25. Now on the same night the Lord said to him, take your father's bull and a second bull, 7 years old, and pull down the altar of Baal, which belongs to your father, and cut down the Asherah that is beside it, and build an altar to the Lord your God on top of this stronghold in an orderly manner. And take a second bull and offer a burnt offering with wood of the Asherah. So in other words, take the Asherah and use that for the wood for the burnt offering, which you shall cut down. Then Gideon took 10 men of his servants and did as the Lord had spoken to him. But listen, and because he was too afraid of his father's household and of the men of the city to do it by day, he did it by night. I mean, you start reading this, and okay, he's like, no, you got the wrong guy, right? Okay, maybe this is you. God does a sign. He goes, okay, it's you. What do you want me to do? I want you to go tear down the elements of worshiping other gods. Okay, I'm in. He even goes and gets 10 guys. Doesn't do it on his own. Goes down and finds 10 guys. Hey, guys, God's come. God spoke. The Lord is with us. We're going to go tear down the Asherah. And we're going to build an altar unto the Lord, and we're going to sacrifice unto the Lord our God. But let's do it at night. And let's make sure that we don't really tell anybody about this, okay? Let's keep it on the DL. But of course, what happens the next morning? Well, of course, everyone notices the element of worship's gone. So guess what? Everybody starts investigating. What's happened? What's going on? Where did it go? And of course, like always happens when you do something that you shouldn't, all of your boys turn on you and they rat you out. So they show up to Joash's house. Joash, we want to see your son Gideon. He tore down the Asherah. And it's time that we contend with him. Here's what's interesting. The guy that just saw an angel, the guy that saw an angel do a miraculous work, the guy that tore it all down doesn't come out and say a word. He stays back in the cave or in his bedroom or closet or whatever it is, and he sends his dad out. Doesn't send him out, but it says his father goes out on his behalf. His father walks out and says, hey, you guys need to move along. They're like, no, we want Gideon. He said, look, here's the deal, guys. If Baal is who he claims to be, if Baal is alive and breathing and majestic and glorious, he will contend with my son. If Baal is all that he claims to be, he will deal with my son, and you have no need to deal with him. Now, the Bible doesn't tell us what's going on here. Maybe this is a father who loves his son and is desperately coming up with some kind of apologetic plea to save him. But maybe just that one small baby step of faith that Gideon took worked in the heart of his father and called him back to Yahweh. Maybe he realizes what his son's done is right. We don't know. The story doesn't tell us. But here's what it does tell us. That cowardly, scared, yet valiant warrior has now been protected by the faithfulness of God. Because the whole town showed up to kill him. And yet he comes out unscathed. And so guess what? Another work of the Lord. So Gideon decides, wow, somehow I got out of that. Somehow I escaped that whole situation. And to get this, they even rename him. The town now gives him a new name called Jerubbaal, which means this: let Baal contend against him. That's now his name. So every time he walks through town and everyone addresses him, they are making the statement, let Baal contend against him. And of course, he's walking alive, which means Baal is not contending with him. So what did the angel tell him? Valiant warrior, go in my strength. You will rescue my people from the hand of the Midianites. And so now we see Gideon take yet another step. We switch scenes. And Gideon now blows the trumpet and sends out the word. Hey guys, we're rallying. We are going to take on the Midianites. So think about that. That's a major step of faith. It's a major step of faith. Calls them all together, gets them all gathered up. You know, you get that picture of the Hollywood movie you see with all the tents everywhere, and guys are out sharpening their swords, and they're getting their armor ready, and they're doing all the things, right? I don't know why I picture the movie Gladiator, right? And when Maximus is walking through and just tapping everyone on the shoulder, guys, we got this, right? But then Gideon goes back to wherever it is that his camp is, and guess what he does? Hey, God, okay, if you're being serious, I mean, if you're really for real, I need you to show me a sign. The angel, the offering, The rescue from the town, not enough. I need a sign. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to lay out a fleece out front. And here's what I want you to do. I want the fleece to be soaking wet in the morning, and I want the ground all around it to be as dry as can be. I want the dew to only fall on the fleece. If that happens, I'll know that you're being serious. I'll believe you, and I'll finally go through what it is that you're calling me to do. So he sleeps, and he wakes up the next morning, and of course, what happens? It's exactly as he asked. Now Gideon's ready. Okay, that was great. That was a cool trick, God. Really neat stuff. Cool sleight of hand, whatever you did. Awesome. But now this time, let's see if you can do the opposite. Can you let the fleece be completely dry, but let the ground be soaking wet with the dew from the day? So Gideon is postponing for 2 days to get a sign to reassure him. Still this scared little boy in a wine press. But sure enough, he wakes up the next day. Fleece dry, ground soaking wet. So now he says, okay, all right, let's do it. So he goes down to his army and he begins to prepare them for battle. Now we're in Judges chapter 7, verse 2. The Lord comes to Gideon again and he says this. The Lord said to Gideon, the people who are with you are too many for me to give Midian into their hands. For Israel would become boastful, saying, my own power has delivered me. Okay, what? We're dealing with an army that's innumerable. Their camels are innumerable. And you think I got too many guys on the squad? You think we got too many people? But guess what? The story doesn't show that Gideon flinches a bit. And so the God says this, we're going to cut down the numbers. Here's how we're going to do it. And I love this. He goes, look, just go out, gather everybody up, and make an announcement. Here's the announcement. If you're scared, go home. I mean, this is just humorous to me. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, again, it's not right, but I picture Maximus. Med. Hey, if you're scared, you guys can go home. And guess what? 22,000 go home. Bible tells us there was only 10,000 left. Can you imagine? So if we're doing our math, that's 32,000. Of 32,000, 22,000 leave. You feeling fired up to go to battle now? I mean, I can't imagine the deflating nature of that moment. And then God comes to Gideon again, and guess what he says? Still too many. Still got too many. If you win with 10,000, you guys will think it was all about you, but it's about me. I'm with you. So he goes, hey, take everybody down, let them get a drink. And there's going to be 2 ways that people drink. Some people are going to lean over like a dog and lick with their tongue and just soak up the water that way. And some will take a knee, grab the water with their hand and kind of pull it up and drink this way. Everyone that scoops with a hand, you keep them. Send the rest of them home. Can you imagine just walking around the pond or river or whatever it is? Hey, you can go home. Hey, you can go home. Hey, you can go home. Hey, you, yeah, all you guys right there. Yeah, you guys are out of here. You guys are out of here. And 9,700 are sent home. They're left with 300. 300. Finally, valiant warrior, Jerubbaal. Watch this. Verses 9 through 11. Now that same night it came about that the Lord said to him, arise, go down against the camp. In other words, against the Midianites. Get everybody riled up and it's time to go to war. For I have given it into your hands. Listen, but look what God does. But if you are afraid to go down, go with Purah, your servant, down to the camp, and you will hear what they say. And afterward, your hands will be strengthened, that you may go down against the camp. So he went with Purah, his servant, down to the outpost of the army that was in the camp. God's like, look, dude, I already know you're scared. We don't even need to do the song and dance anymore. Like, I get it. If you're scared, which you are, grab your servant, go down. And here's what's going to happen. He's going to walk down amongst the camp, and a guy's going to recount a dream that he has. It's got all this symbolism in it. And one guy goes, the dream that you're speaking of is in reference to Jerubbaal, Gideon, the son of Joash, who will deliver us from the hand of the Midianites. That's all that happens. I mean, he probably heard 100 dreams or stories or whatever you hear in a war camp. But he just happens to overhear a guy saying, I had this dream, and another guy go, that's Jerubbaal. That's Gideon. And he is the one who will rise up and deliver us from the Midianites. You know, the story of Gideon reminds me a lot of my son Tal. A few summers ago, we decided to really have a pool summer. We came back to visit family, and we got to be here for like 3 or 4 weeks, and we were in the pool just every single day, right? And Tal was kind of getting to that point where he could swim enough that we trusted him, right? We knew he could get from point A to the side of the pool, and he would be okay. He, on the other hand, wasn't quite as confident in himself, right? Typical child, staying within about 3 inches of the side of the pool, typically like out here kicking legs but holding to the side, all those kinds of things. So, of course, finally, as he gets more and more comfortable, I'm like, hey, Tal, you know what you would love? You know what would be so much fun? Come over here and jump. You love to jump. Jump to Dad and let Dad catch you. And, of course, what does he say? No. Nuh-uh. I'm like, Tal, come on, bud. I promise it'll be okay. Nuh-uh. So then what do? Okay, Tal, would your daddy let you get hurt? No. Would your daddy tell you to do something that would put you in danger? No. Do you really believe that I'm going to let you get hurt or harmed in any way? No. Then come over here and let me catch you. And of course, it's the slow rise, right? And the kind of walk like, I think this is okay. Gets aside, all right, buddy, you ready? I think so. Right? And you do the whole, all right, ready. On 3, jump to Dad. Okay? 1, 2, 3. Okay, hold on, Dad. Can you scoot a little closer? Can you scoot a little closer, Dad? Okay, so we scoot closer. 1, 2, 3. Maybe takes a step this time. Well, hold on. Like, what happens if this and that? It's like, okay, bud, like, here's the deal. I'm right here. I'm going to catch you. Everything's going to be okay. You can do this. You're okay. Your daddy is here to protect you. Your dad is going to keep you safe. I am here. Well, I'm not a very good swimmer. That's why I'm going to catch you. What if this happens? I will pull you up and you will be okay. And so, of course, you go over and over, right? You do the whole like 50 chances of 1, 2, 3 and right to the edge, right? Couple times it stops so last minute you think they're going to fall in, but somehow they're able to balance themselves back and go no. And then, of course, the whole family gets involved, right? It's big sis. Tal, it's going to be okay. I was scared once too, but Dad caught me, and it's so much fun. You can do it. You can do it. You can do it. He's not sure, but sis has a pretty good influence, right? Until finally, 1, 2, 3, and here we go. And it's funny because they always come running full steam ahead. But then when they get to the end, they kind of stop. And then they kind of basically just reach. Because now they've gotten you close enough, right? To where really they have their hands like on your hands or on your shoulder. And then they kind of step in, right? And that's their jumping in the pool. But inevitably what happens? Even in that step and fall, they come up. They realize that everything's okay. Big smile on their face. I did it! Well, kind of, right? And so then, of course, what do? Can I do it again? Yeah, you can, buddy. Go. And then what's it turn into? Dad, back up. Back up, Dad. I can get out there. And what's happening? It's Gideon. It's Gideon. See, we're all Gideon. We're all Gideon. I don't know what your enemy is or what it is that's against you that you're afraid of. But here's the reality. You're not a great swimmer. You're not even a warrior. You're not brave. But your God is. And He is with you. He is faithful. He will always catch you. He will never let you drown. You see, the story of the gospel is the story of Gideon. We are enslaved. Our sin has brought us low. Our sin has devastated us and comes like a cloud of locusts. But our God, despite our faithlessness, is faithful. And he sends his son in that act of faithfulness. And that son is the one who conquers sin. It is that son who is victorious. It is that death on the cross and it is that resurrection that is the thing that saves us. We only have to receive the call of God and respond into that. We respond to the act that is Jesus Christ. That's salvation. And then it's the same act every single day after we're saved. You see, the gospel is not just a moment that we give our life to Jesus and that's it. No, every single day we wake up and do what? God will look at us and say, "Go, I am with you, O valiant warrior." And we say, "But I don't know enough. I'm not educated enough. I don't really know how to communicate the gospel clearly enough." And he's like, "Go in the strength. I will send you." We do the same thing as Gideon. Well, what about the fleece? Hey, well, can you do this? If I leave and I come back and you're still here, maybe. I'm still afraid. Can somebody around me tell me that I can do this? Can somebody around me tell me that this is safe? And that's how we walk daily until we get to the point that we trust. We trust the Lord. Some of you in this room are like Gideon in that you have been given a specific call. Now, this is rare, but some of you have it. And it could be, I'm not talking about taking on Midianites. I'm talking about a call to lead a small group. I'm talking about a call that you know in your heart of hearts that God has called you to share the gospel with your neighbor or your coworker. I'm talking about a call to teach children the scriptures in the morning at our church. For some of you, it's the first time that God's calling you to be one that gives out of what you've been given, to financially finally tithe and trust Lord with what you have. But you go, "Man, I don't have much and I'm not important. My family's not important. What if the town finds out? What if my parents find out?" We do the same thing as Gideon. Are you real? Like, for real? Is this really going to happen? And we leave our fleeces all along the way of God, make it wet, make it dry, make it wet, make it dry. And folks, here's what I'm here to tell you. The same God who took a scared boy in a wine press and turned him into one in verse 15 to this. When Gideon heard the account of the dream and its interpretation, he bowed in worship, and he turned to the camp of Israel and said, "Arise, for the Lord has given the camp of Midian into your hands." Gideon finally becomes Jerubbaal. Gideon finally becomes the valiant warrior that God told him he was in the very beginning. And so some of you have a call on your life this morning, and you are terrified to pursue it. And your God is with you. Arise. Arise, church. For the Lord has given whatever it is he's called you to into your hands by his power and by his strength. Some of you are still captivated by sin. Arise this morning and know the Lord has paid the penalty of your sin in full, and you need to be faithful to a faithful God. You have been living a faithless life, but thank God for a faithful God who has pursued you from the beginning of time till this very moment, right here, right now. For some of you, it's daily living. I don't know if I can do it every single day. Arise, church. Arise and go, for the Lord is given every single day to you if you will trust him with it. Pursue the Lord. Gideon is an underdog who overcomes unbelievable circumstances, not by his own might, not by his own power, but by the very power and the faithfulness that is in his God. I would love to see us be that church. And what I love about the story of Gideon is this: we're not going to get it right off the bat. For some of you right here in this very moment is the first day that God has called you out, O valiant warrior. And you're going to do just like Gideon. You're going to take a little step of faith and then go, "Oh, if you're here when I get back." And you're going to take another little step of faith. "Okay, well, let's put a fleece out." Take another little step of faith. And you're going to need somebody around you to go, hey, this guy, this gal, God's using them, until you finally arise. So if you've been taking steps, but you know you're taking a step, what you think is backwards, it's not true. God is faithful in your faithlessness. God is faithful even in your faithlessness. Keep taking your steps of faith, church. And let's courageously pursue the Lord. And know that anything that is of sin and is of darkness and is of shame and is of guilt, that God has already overcome that, and he has already handed us that victory, and we trust in that. Let's pray as we close this morning. Father, thank you for today. God, we all here this morning are nothing. We are nobodies. There's a statement, I believe, it goes something like, we are simply beggars telling other people where to get bread. That's our story, Lord. And so, God, I pray over each individual, and I pray over myself as well, God, that I would pursue the salvation that comes in Jesus Christ. If someone's here this morning that have not surrendered their life to Jesus, God, I pray that you would call out to them and remind them the Lord is with them today, and that they would surrender to the call of the gospel. Father, there's someone here that just daily pursuing you is a struggle. God, I pray that today that they would trust that the Lord is with them, and that the Lord has given them victory over every day to pursue you faithfully, because you are always faithful. And God, if there's anyone in here that has a specific call in their life, and that could be so many different things. For some, it's those that are going on this mission trip in 2 days. For some, it may be taking an opportunity that's away from what they're used to permanently. God, for some, it's generosity. God, for some, it's evangelism. But you have specifically put something on their heart. And God, today I pray that they would pursue it and trust you, because you are always faithful. I love you, Jesus, and I thank you for this morning. I ask that you would be with us as we go about our day, and would you be with us as we worship you now. It's in Christ's name that we pray. Amen. Church, would you stand as we sing?